So this is Leyla. Just giving her a okay, she's back. It's cute. It's cute to see you. So you'll see more of her in a second. This sermon, Leyla, is preached to you. All right, are you listening? You are. Amazing. You're doing a lot better job than some other people. Leyla, we're celebrating your baptism today on the day that is the feast of the baptism of Jesus. And the significance of that is hard to underestimate. We just heard the story of Jesus' baptism in the River Jordan. And that story marks the culmination of Matthew's description of who Jesus is as he comes into this world. You remember, if you've been here in recent weeks, that as we are reading the Gospel of Matthew throughout this coming year, and it begins with a genealogy, which begins with Abraham. Abraham, our father. The father of the Christian faith, and the Jewish faith, and the Muslim faith. The father through whom God acted to claim a people, to become active in the history of the world. And through Abraham and his descendants, God has continued to be active. And Matthew begins his gospel with that genealogy to let us know that Jesus, who we celebrate today, is the culmination of that line of God's work in the world. Generation after generation is passed down from Abraham until it comes to rest on Joseph, who is married to Mary, the mother of Jesus. So all that the Israelite history represents comes to its culmination. Most particularly, the kingship of King David, who represented for all generations the power of that nation, the power of that people to lead a just society. And in that line, Jesus is born. But in the history of the people of Israel, there is another line too. And that line is the line of the prophets. Throughout their history, there are these voices, most of them not important in any other way. Some of them have positions in government, like Elijah seems to have, or Jeremiah seems to have. Some of them are clearly outsiders, like Amos and Hosea and those prophets. There is a line of them that's continuous throughout the history, and in Matthew's telling of the story, it comes to its culmination in John the Baptist. John is the last of that string of prophets in the history of Israel. And so today, in this story of the baptism, we have the coming together of all of the historic line of Israel, together with all of the prophetic line of Israel, and it comes together in the moment of Christ's baptism in the river. And in that moment, the voice comes from heaven and says, "You are my son," as if to proclaim the climax of that historical record. And then Matthew tells us Jesus is prepared to begin. And as we know, then he goes into the wilderness, comes back, and begins to proclaim that the kingdom of God is here. That this kingdom is a kingdom of justice and love and forgiveness and truth-telling, and that his followers are to be the bearers of that kingdom. And in the Gospels, there is no record that Jesus himself baptized anybody. But immediately upon his resurrection, he says to his disciples, "Go and make disciples of all nations and baptize them in the name of God." And we know that immediately in those early stories of the book of Acts, baptism is the way that the church brings people into the experience of Jesus. Not just the experience, not just the memory of Jesus, but they become the experience of Jesus in the world. They become the children of God. They become the bearers of this kingdom that Christ proclaimed. Everyone who is baptized becomes that bearer. And that, amazingly, when you think about it, has been going on for 2,000 years. And every person here who was baptized intimately, by name, one by one, by one, by one. And that's what the kingdom of God is made of. All of us baptized one by one to be the bearers of God's kingdom in the world, to be Christ. So, Leyla, what does that mean